came from college and they sang these beautiful songs during the ceremony. Um, 3 songs right from the start, and then they have 5 kids. They have 3 of their own, and then they adopted 2 from Ethiopia. And so they all of the children wrote letters to their dad. And then the parents gave a speech, and the in-laws gave a speech, and then the wife did this unbelievable thanking everybody. And then she wrote a love letter to them. And it was just like, I mean, I was a mess the whole time.
Right.
But it was beautiful. The music was beautiful. It was just great. Yeah, but a really hard day.
Yeah.
Like
Just get through one more week.
I don't know. At this point, it's like get through one day at a time. One day at a time.
I know, right? That's unfortunately true.
But it's yeah.
Reading this editorial on your that was really well done. And the Herald.
Yes, the newspaper.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thought it was good. Yeah, that's good.
It's a huge distraction, and I'm sure what they don't understand is it affects students.
But my kids have been great. Like they're so good at these presentations. I love every year they just make me look so good. Like well done.
Well done.
But they are reading some really heavy stuff this year.
Yeah. So I've read Slaughterhouse 5. I've read it a couple times. That's one of them. What Made Mandy Run? I think that's one.
Yeah, I don't think Slaughterhouse is one of mine. It might be second hour
Yeah, I think
or third hour.
it's
Third hour.
It's next
hour.
The next hour.
Yeah. What Made Maddie Run is in my group. Gosh, I should know. Are they doing On Pills and Needles
Yes.
today? Yeah, that's a pretty heavy read. Like all my summer vacation reading is all these heavy books. Because I'm like,
Whatever happened to beach reads?
when we go to the beach, I take beach.
Hi, this is Moritz.
Yes.
There's a parent wanting to be escorted. Would you like me to bring him or her down?
I would love that.
That's very professional.
That's okay. I usually send a kid, but because they're not here yet.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
I do take beach reads.
Good.
And Ken hates it because he's like, hello, and I'm like, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I'll see you at 4.
And now I have Audible, so it's worse. Because on an airplane over.
Yeah.
You know, and
What does he want to do? He want to chit
to
chat?
talk. I'm like, yeah, he reads a lot of nonfiction, which I do too, but
Yeah.
he reads like self-help, like this is corruption, education. Not today.
I'm in this jag of nonfiction biographies. I've read probably a year and all last year reading biographies, which I think they're great. But then I'll read a fiction. It's like, oh yeah, these are fun. These are fun.
They are. Yeah. Have you read? I teach a lot of kids read memoir, so they're like biographies, but they're reflective.
Mhm.
So there's a memoir called Enrique's Journey, which actually was presented yesterday in the Fifth Hour about a young man whose mom abandoned him in South America. So he rode trains to California to find her. And it's about immigration, and it's a hard go, but the rough times was when he was in Central America and Mexico, not when he got to America, right? So it's this interesting. And then there's a nonfiction book. I wouldn't call it a biography or a memoir, called The Good Nurse. You read that one?
I have not read that one.
It's a true story about a man who was a nurse, and he had a tendency to work in burn units. That's kind of where he got his edge was. But he would take it upon himself to pull people out of their misery.
Was there a movie?
I don't know if there
I
was.
think.
Oh my gosh, that would be creepy.
Yeah.
But the book is just how he was able to get these drug cocktails to give to his patients so that they would just slip away. I mean, and then he would bounce to a new place, and then he would bounce to a new
All kinds of
place.
social commentary.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really, that's
So do you,
one of the more haunting
do you ever get parents pushing back on the books that your kids choose?
for this.
No?
I did, actually had a group, you might be hearing the presentation on 19 minutes. Hi.
A reason not to, no, there's routines.
For 19 minutes, which is a book about school shooting. They originally wanted to read Columbine, which is a nonfiction book
Right.
about that. And the mom read a couple, like 100 pages, and she emailed me, and she's like, I don't think I want. And I'm like, great, I will present it to the group, and they can either disband and join other groups, or they can choose a different book. So they chose Jodi Picoult's 19 Minutes, which is a fictional account of a school shooting. So they're really good at, the kids are amazing at like adapting.
Right.
Oh, I got it.
Yeah.
They wanna come in,
Go do your
I
thing.
guess I'll unlock the door.
I don't know about what that's about.
I know.
There. I'm Emily. How are you?
Well, thank you.
Hi, good.
You have,
He is, but I'm here.
the others?
How about you?
Just on the school board as well.
Hi, Emily. Good to see you again. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. How's everybody today? Hi there. I'm Emily.
1, 2, 3. This is your board. Oh, right here. Don't, and that's what you need to survive that. Here is the picture for your presentation. Are these for me or for them?
Those are, yeah.
I got two. I got multiple.
I don't know what I'm doing.
Yes, this looks good. That's good.
Alright, I think I'm looking.
Look at how you have right, but. Just a second, our portfolio is getting started. Don't start, I'm gonna go shut that door. Okay. And then you can start. Okay. Take a deep breath. It's gonna be awesome. How things are happening out there. Hi. Ladies, whenever you're ready.
Good morning. We have completed a presentation on the book Unbearable Lightness by Portia de Rossi. I'm Madison Hedrick.
I'm Kendall Aiken.
And I'm Patty Gallahan. Portia de Rossi is a modern actress from Horsham, Australia. She is best known for her role as Nell Porter on the Ally McBeal show. She struggled with her weight for years after beginning her modeling career at the age of 12, and she silently struggled with it until her collapse on the set of Who is the Biggest Tout, where she was diagnosed with anorexia, cirrhosis, and osteoporosis, and organ failure. She recovered, married Ellen DeGeneres, and now speaks out for the rights of the LGBTQ+ community and about her eating disorder. So, Unbearable Lightness is a book written by Portia de Rossi, documenting her struggle with eating disorders and about her sexuality. It encompasses the topics of eating disorders, mental health, body image, and a lot more. And it won Goodreads autobiography and memoir in 2010. And it is at adult level. And eating disorders all have self-hatred, fear, and anxiety in common. It can distort the image that victims see themselves and affect the way they do certain things to lose weight or attempt to make them look different than what they need to be. So there are many different types of eating disorders that are more than just anorexia and bulimia, which are the most talked about. But anorexia nervosa is where victims will eat less and less because they believe they're getting overweight or getting fat, or they're fearful of gaining weight, and they lose dangerous amounts of weight in an attempt to do so. Bulimia nervosa is where victims will go through cycles of binging and purging, where they eat a lot of food and then they throw it up afterward in an attempt to get rid of the shame and guilt, which leads them to go back on diet and starts a vicious cycle. Orthorexia is the obsession with healthy or proper eating. OSFED is a significant disorder but does not meet the full criteria for anorexia or bulimia. ARFID is similar to anorexia but does not come from feelings of self-hatred or fear of gaining weight. PICA is where victims eat things that are not necessarily food or have nutritional value, such as hair or paint chips. Rumination disorder is where victims will regurgitate the food and maybe re-swallow, re-chew, or spit out. UFED is a significant disorder but does not meet the full criteria for any disorder. Laxative use is where victims use excessive amounts of laxatives to feel thin or empty. And compulsive exercise is where victims will exercise intensely and constantly to the point where it interferes with their daily lives.
Eating disorders are all around us, but they're not commonly talked about. In the NCAA Division I, more than 1/3 of female athletes suffer from the mental and physical symptoms of anorexia. 93% of college trainers want to bring more attention towards eating disorders and preventions. 25% work at an institution with no policy on eating disorders. 1 in 5 people who die from anorexia commit suicide. 30 million people in the United States suffer from eating disorders today, and 40 to 60% of elementary school girls ages 6 to 12 are concerned about their weight or becoming fat. Now, each eating disorder comes with its own symptoms, but these are a few common ones that usually fit into multiple eating disorders. Eating disorders cause the brain to see a very distorted and overweight image of their body. So an abnormally skinny person may look in the mirror and see somebody extremely overweight. Victims may appear uncomfortable eating around other people because they are afraid they may be judged on how much they're eating and the types of food they're eating. They may be uncomfortable doing activities with family and friends because they are worried about the way their body will look while continuing action. They may have trouble sleeping from anxious thoughts and worries about their body or how much food intake they've had that day. They may have brittle nails, cavities, dry skin, fainting spells, dizziness, all from malnutrition, and cuts and calluses due to vomiting. They may have fatigue from lack of sleep. They may suffer from extreme weight loss, excessive exercise, and constantly tracking their calories. They usually have a very negative self-image with little to no self-esteem. They have fear of gaining weight and an impaired immune function from not enough food.
We asked 68 people if they had ever felt the need to diet or lose weight, but not because the doctor told them to do so. And we were kind of shocked by the results because most of the people that took the survey were between 14 and 15 years of age, and 60.6% of them said yes, which is very concerning as people who aren't allowed to vote yet are concerned about how much they weigh or what they look like, what they need to look like when a doctor doesn't agree.
We asked the same group of students if they had ever purposely thrown up food, and 9.2% of them said that yes, they had thrown up food. 9.2% of 68 kids is roughly 6 people, which is very high, concerning that we only had 68 students take this. If the entire school took it, those numbers would probably be much higher. When we asked students how concerned they were with becoming overweight, 12 of them said that they were not concerned at all, while 3 of them were at a complete 10. The other students ranged anywhere from a 2 to a 9 with how they felt about their self-image. This shows that this disorder is not just in Hollywood, but it's right here in our school. Have you ever felt the need to exercise intensely and constantly? Was another question that we asked the students. The answer that I highlighted depicts an eating disorder perfectly, because when Derasi was first beginning anorexia, she explained that her need to exercise intensely and constantly was based on what she had eaten that day and how many calories she consumed.
So unverbalitis includes a lot of state standards. It's meets a lot of them. For example, 10.2 through 10.5. So So standard 10.2 states that students must be able to understand and analyze the development of central ideas or themes throughout the text. And readers who read this book can understand the development of the author's sexuality and her eating disorder and her mental health as it develops and changes over the book. Standard 10.3 says that students must be able to understand complex characters and their interaction with other characters. And DeRossi she interacts with a lot of people, like her coworkers, her friends, her family, and that develops her into who she is. Standard 10.4 states that students must be able to understand the words used in the book and how it incorporates and changes the feel or the tone of it. And DeRossi uses a lot of different things, like different words or phrases or different things that she says to convey her feelings and thoughts throughout her eating disorder and throughout her life. And standard 10.5 says that students must be able to understand and recognize the manipulation of time used in the book. For example, Unbearable Lightness starts off with DeRossi at her height of her eating disorder. So when she's counting calories, when she's running a lot, her guilt and shame and fear that she's going to be overweight. And then it goes into her childhood and how it started.
This book is a very valuable book because it brings attention to eating disorders and sexuality such as the LGBTQ+ community in our modern world. It explains the thought process of somebody who has an eating disorder and explains how it's more than just refusing to eat. There's a psychological part to it as well. It explains the hardest parts of eating disorders and goes way past I'm refusing to eat and really dives down to how she's feeling and the guilt and shame she feels every day. The adult reading level presents a challenge to readers in their thinking process as they go through the book, and it fits into multiple classes such as language arts, sociology, health, psychology, and human behaviors. The one downside to this book is it could be used as a how-to book because DeRossi explains exactly how she became anorexic. And so if somebody was struggling with an eating disorder, they could use this book as an example. So perhaps this book could be used as an introduction to another book which focuses more on the recovery of an eating disorder.
We asked the same 68 students if they knew what anorexia and bulimia are. And over half of the students said that they did know what both of those disorders were, which was very comforting to hear. While 7.6% of students we surveyed said that they didn't know what either disorder was, and that's about 5 students. And this was only taken by 68 kids, and if the entire school would have taken part in their survey, those numbers, again, would have been a lot higher.
We also asked the question, do you feel like schools you've attended do a good job talking about eating disorders, prevention, and warning signs, etc.? 89.2% of those kids said no. This is very alarming because eating disorders is a very big problem in our community today, and it is not widely talked about at schools. Introducing the book Unbearable Lightness would help increase this awareness and help kids be able to spot warning signs.
Has anyone ever talked to you about eating disorders? We noticed that over half of the students said that no one had ever brought up eating disorders around them or given them a conversation about it, which was very disconcerting. But the last answer on there is critical information because it explains that when people only start talking about it when it becomes relevant and dangerous. We also have a slide of opinions that people gave us about eating disorders. The first one explains how the student feels unheard and how it's not just as simple as it seems on the surface. They explain in detail their experience with it and how it has personally affected them throughout their life. The second opinion doesn't go into as much detail, but was included to show that students not only struggle with the disorder itself, but with the thoughts and anxieties that accompany it. And then the last opinion was an Amazon review of the book that was included because of, quote, her story is unremarkable and that she felt the need to tell this story at all is hard to believe, unquote. This is not at all meant to be rude or disrespectful, and opinions are supposed to be respected, but people without eating disorders forget how good they have it and how brave you have to be to speak up about having a disorder. And the more educated people are, the less likely they will be to judge others who are struggling.
This is all excited. Thank you so much for your time. Do you have any questions?
Sure, I've got a few, but let me start with one. So you, in one of your slides, you talked about a handful of classes this book might be appropriate for, right? So is this really a book for language arts, or is it really a book for health class? Where do you think it would fall into the curriculum?
It fits in a lot of different classes. It fits in the psychology and sociology part because there's a big psychology part to an eating disorder because all these opinions are coming around you and you have your self-thoughts that are bringing you down with all that guilt and shame. This also does fit into a health class because this eating disorder pertains to your body and all the activities that you can do surrounding this. So I think it would fit less in the language arts and more towards the psychology and health part.
I have a question for you guys. I really liked all the survey questions that you did. Those were really well thought out. From all of your research and the responses you got, what do you think are some of the underlying causes of eating disorders and that cause girls, and so there's men in there as well, to resort to eating disorders?
A lot of it is the fact that we are in a public high school and there is a lot of peer pressure and student opinion, and people just want to feel accepted in their community, and this is how some people express that need.
What are some things you think could be done differently to help prevent the onset of eating disorders?
Education. Education is the first step to prevention because the more people learn about it, the more they realize the effects and how to prevent it and possibly recognize somebody else with that struggle with the disorder like this.
This sort of goes a little bit with my question. So what other resources do you predict would be necessary as tandem with teaching this curriculum in the classroom?
Well, there could probably be, along with teaching in the classroom, probably just not as, I guess, taboo because people really don't talk about it. Like not just education in the classroom, but everywhere else around it too. Because parents might not talk to their kids about it, friends might not talk to their other friends about it. Some people might not feel like they can talk to their counselor or a friend or a family member about it, and that just leads to isolation.
So what would you tell the school board about this book if parents decided it was too heavy a topic and that we had parents who showed up to say this shouldn't be one of the adoption books? What ammunition would you give us as a board?
This is a very heavy book because it's very raw and there's a lot of she doesn't cover anything up. It's kind of just her story like as it's told. So, but it is very helpful because it also is like so raw and there's like really good like facts to help like inform people about eating disorders. And so probably just that this book is really great at informing people like what an eating disorder really is and how it's more than just refusing to eat.
And I would add to that it is a very heavy topic, but the heavy topics need to be talked about. Otherwise, no one's going to do it, and they're just going to get more and more heavy of a topic and more of a problem.
Thank you.
I'm Taylor Moshe.
I'm Hannah Smith.
And I'm Ryan Wayne. And our book was What Made Maddie Run, the streak of struggles and tragic deaths of an all-American team. So, What Made Maddie Run? Written by ESPN writer Kate Fagan, What Made Maddie Run follows the story of the University of Pennsylvania runner, Madison Hollering, in the build-up towards her tragic death by suicide. Hollering's vital story reveals the mounting pressure upon students and athletes in the battle against depression and suicidal thoughts that many have. The author, Kate Fagan, is a former ESPN writer, commentator, and reporter.
How did Kate Fagan hear about Madison Hollering? Fagan read an article in her newspaper that briefly summarized Maddie's story.
In 16 months after Maddie's tragic death, Kate reached out to the Hollering family with questions. They later opened their home, which allowed Kate to write her first piece that month.
Split image. So prior to writing the actual novel, Fagan wrote a piece for ESPN about Maddie's story that was published in 2015. The actual book itself was then published in 2017.
Why is this book controversial? This book is controversial because it addresses one girl's struggle with mental health, which ultimately leads to her suicide. Madison ended up taking her own life by running and jumping off of a parking garage. Some of the details that are used to describe this are somewhat graphic and could be a trigger. When connecting her own personal story to Maddie's life, she also uses some explicit language. She also talked to an attempted suicide survivor to gain perspective, and this conversation very openly addresses the feelings that would even cause someone to consider suicide. It also addresses the stigma surrounding mental health as it pertains to athletes and students. And also, suicide has greatly affected our own community, which would make it hard for students to read. If they know someone who's committed suicide or even have suicidal thoughts themselves, this book could be a trigger.
Despite its controversial topic, this book carries great literary value. For awards, it was a semifinalist for ESPN Award for Literary Sports Writing and was a #1 New York Times bestseller for sports and fitness. High school acceptance-wise, What Made Maddie Run has a 7.28 reading level, but carries high-level content and themes, often dealing with suicide and mental health. This allows it to meet the grade level expectation. Author Kate Fagan herself says, I think many high schoolers, regardless of gender, regardless of whether they play sports, can likely connect with some piece of Madison's story. This book can be relatable to all high schoolers, and many will be able to find value while reading it. Despite the heavy themes, What Made Maddie Run can be extremely beneficial for teens, with many drawable connections and humane value for all. So, Colorado curriculum. What Made Maddie Run can be implemented and complement several high school curriculums, such as English, physical education/health, and psychology. Seeing that this book centers around the potential pressures athletes face, PE is a logical course the book fits with. For psychology, mental health and suicide is one of the main themes of What Made Maddie Run, which deals heavily with similar concepts in psychology courses. When compared to state standards for 9th grade novels, What Made Maddie Run has a developing theme and central idea over the course of the text. Over the course of the text, you see the central idea of mental health and Maddie's sort of her thinking change, her moods change, and that's kind of the central idea. You see a determinal craft, which is point of view and vocabulary. Throughout the book, you see different points of view of friends, and there's different vocabulary because, and for relatable life connections for readers, a lot of high schoolers can draw connections, relate to her story, kind of connect with the piece of this book.
The relevance to LBSIP. There's no denying that suicide continues to have an impact on our community. People may ask, why have there been so many suicides here at Arapahoe? Why have there been so many suicides in our surrounding schools and region? And specifically, why does Colorado have such high suicide rates? After discussing with the school psychologist, Ms. Clavo, and school counselor, Ms. Kershaw, they made it clear that suicide needs to be viewed as a national health epidemic. To begin, we asked them, how big of an issue do you think suicide is at Arapahoe? In discussing this question, a major point that they brought up involves societal issues that are affecting communities. As parenting relationships have evolved, teenagers may not be as properly equipped to handle difficulties. Teenagers have not been taught how to handle negative emotions due to a culture of instant gratification. This needs to be changed. It can be difficult to think that each statistic you see on the slide represents the loss of a life, and each loss affects that person's family and community. A terrible ripple effect. Suicide has become the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. Suicide has become the second leading cause of death in youth ages 10 to 19 years old. And suicide among girls ages 15 to 19 years old has doubled since 2007 to 2015 when it reached its highest point in 40 years. The youth suicide rate has increased by 58% in the past decade. On average, suicide costs the state over $1 billion lost in lifetime medical and work loss per suicide death. And in Colorado, it has become the 7th leading cause of death in Colorado. And in our state, on average, one person dies by suicide every 8 hours.
Why is it important to talk about and learn about suicide? There's no easy way to talk about suicide, but we felt that this book gives you a glimpse into one girl's struggle without glamorizing it. When we talked to Ms. Kershaw and Ms. Clago, they said that several studies have been done, which concluded that talking about suicide and mental health is very important. Talking about it gives people freedom to address their own mental health issues openly. The more we talk about suicide and mental health, the more people will know, and it will help to end the stigma surrounding it. We know that reading this book would require that certain ethical pieces be considered. If what made Maddie Run was implemented into the curriculum, students should have an outlet to talk about their feelings and an opportunity to opt out.
Suicide remains an issue all around, and reading this book helps bring attention and awareness to the issue. So why this book should be approved? This book can serve as a conversation starter, helping destigmatize the topic of teenage suicide and mental health, especially as the issue grows nationwide.
This book can help people identify the signs of someone struggling with anxiety or depression, and it can also give them an idea of how to help someone who is struggling with suicide thoughts.
And this book is very relatable to all high schoolers, no matter their gender, their age, interests, or involvement level in school. It's especially relevant to high school athletes who deal with performance pressure similar to mine. We understand the concerns over teaching this book, but ignoring the topic of suicide will not help solve the issue.
Naturally, various precautions would need to be taken, such as opting out and having counselors available for students to talk to. After completing the book, students should take a suicide screener that makes sure they're doing okay.
The issue of teenage suicide cannot be stressed enough due to its widespread effect. While there are possible issues that could arise, the beneficial potential of implementing what made Maddie Run outweighs the negatives.
The resources that are included in the back of the book are up here. Please note that safety tell is not in the book, but it's an important resource. So the book does provide with help, or if someone, just provides resources. Yes.
So I went to the same high school that Madison Eleanor went to, and I never knew her personally, but I also was on the track team in the high school, so her story is just emotional for me to hear. I mean, I followed it, and she lives in the same town that I grew up in. So I think it's a great topic, and I guess that my question for each of you is, what's one thing that made you think differently about suicide from your reading of Madison's story?
For me personally, an idea in this book is she's all American. Like, she seems like she has the perfect life. Her social media is happy. But what I drew from this is that, like, mental health, depression, suicidal thought, it can strike anyone at any time. And, we have to be aware of that. We have to try our best to, keep that from happening. Because it's not just limited to, a certain group of people. It can be anyone.
Yeah, that's what struck me as well, that the perfect people who you think are the most amazing often struggle themselves, and so you need to be careful about not judging them if they have struggles.
And I think specifically for me, when reading this, it was hard to read that Maddie, she didn't know what was happening with her. I think that's hard because people who struggle with suicide don't know that, like, sometimes they don't know that they have suicidal thoughts, but I think it's interesting that it's like hard to pinpoint and it's hard to put a time frame on it, and she didn't know how far along she was.
So one of the programs you guys know we do here is Sources of Strength. And the big mantra of Sources of Strength is not to focus on that sad shock and trauma, but rather the hope, help, and strength. So how do you see Sources of Strength being tied into this curriculum and focusing on students' individual ability to overcome some of these thoughts and awareness and get the help that they need?
Well, one possible thing when teaching this book is tying in some of those sources of strength activities that focus on the brighter, like the more recovery side, I guess, than the darker negative side. So we could definitely like tie that in when teaching this book.
And Sources of Strength is definitely like helpful, trying to work together, find your strengths. And I think that is very important to know, but then students should also not see the bad side of it, but they need to be aware of the facts and mental health and just information about that.
Does this book give you hope? I mean, is it just about her story, or does it give you a blueprint? Would someone who read it that might have suicide ideation, could they take hope and comfort from this book?
I think they could, because it's not just following exactly how her story went. It relates back to athletes, and Kate, the author, was a college athlete who had similar experiences in wanting to quit, like that Maddie had. But I also think that this book, I think it gives hope because it shows that this is not it's not unique, and that this is happening everywhere, so you're not alone.
I also think like it doesn't give like an exact like recovery, like how to help people, but like maybe we could tie it in like something else that gives you like resources.
One of the balancing acts that you do is you don't want to glorify suicide, right? And I think you spoke to that. So how would you respond to a critic that would say, well, this whole book is about someone who commits suicide? Isn't that glorifying it? And why should we have it in our curriculum if that's the case?
I think it addresses this in the book. She said she talked to the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention and she worked with them. So like they have certain standards that they have to meet writing a book, so it's respectful and you address it respectfully. I think she did a really good job of working with them and like making it really respectful.
Yeah, in the back of the book, it provided words that you should use that would make suicide just the way you need to talk about it over saying other things.
I think the overall tone of this book isn't about glorifying suicide. You can tell that the point is prevention. The point is like trying to get someone who needs help. Great job. Thank you.
you're ready.
So for our project, we focused on the memoir by Rick Van Warner called On Pills and Needles. I'm Izzy Rosado.
I'm Maddie Rocco.
I'm Randy Long.
Okay, so the author of this book is Rick Van Warner, and he's a seasoned journalist, crisis management counselor, and media relations expert. He's also the father of Tommy, who is the main focus of this book. And he felt obligated to share Tommy's struggles with opioid addiction through his novel On Pills and Needles.
So On Pills and Needles, written by Rick Van Warner, follows the author's journey through his son's opioid addiction. This memoir explains the real-life events that Van Warner and his family experienced during their son's addiction and recovery. Several detoxifications, recoveries, and relapses are present throughout the book.
On Pills and Needles has won the Christian Book Award, and it was a finalist in the biography and memoir section. And it is a 10th grade reading level, and the classes that we felt it was most appropriate for would be 9th grade honors English, which is the class that we are currently in, and health, psychology, and AP psychology, which are all sophomore and above classes.
Opioids background. So opioids can come in the form of pills or needles as suggested by the book. And it can include heroin, fentanyl, which is a synthetic opioid, pain relievers such as oxycodone, hydrocodone, also known as Vicodin, codeine, and morphine. And opioids can be used in medicine as pain relievers, and these are safe as long as they're used for a short amount of time and follow the prescription. And taking them out of sequence can be very dangerous. And opioid overdoses can be immediately reversed using the drug naloxone.
Some more opioid background. So 21 to 29% of people prescribed with opioid pain relievers misuse them. 4 to 6% of those who misuse medication transfer to heroin eventually. 80% of heroin users started by misusing opioid medication. More than 130 people in the U.S. die daily from opioid overdoses. And opioid overdoses increased 30% from July of 2016 to September of 2017. And this chart shows that opioids result in more deaths than heroin, and most recently synthetic opioids such as fentanyl have become the most dangerous in America.
So opioids have been around for 70 years, but they started to be a lot more used in the 90s when pharmaceutical companies guaranteed that people would not become addicted, which obviously did not happen. Because in 2017 alone, over 47,000 Americans died from opioid overdose. And that same year, over 1.7 million Americans suffered from substance use disorder.
Okay, so some key vocabulary used throughout the book is detoxification, which is the process of clearing the body of the drug, and it rests the organs, which forces the liver to drive toxins out. And it improves circulation of the blood and energizes the body, and this can be done either at home or in the hospital. And recovery is the medical or therapeutic treatment to overcome dependence on drugs, and it includes medicine, counseling with experts, and spending time with other addicts. And it can take place in centers or specific groups. And relapse is failing to recover from the drug and falling back to it, and it can occur after years of recovery or even just days. And it can be set off after simple mishaps that lead to depression and once again reliance on the drug, which then restarts the whole process.
So our group contacted the author, Rick Van Warner, and he luckily responded to a few of our questions. First was, how did Tommy first become addicted to opioids? And Van Warner responded, he began using them recreationally at age 16. Some of the high schoolers were getting into it, mostly OxyContin and similar opioid pills, stolen from their parents or grandparents' medicine cabinets and sold for $5. It was an escape that escalated quickly. By crushing the pills and neutralizing the time release aspect, they could be smoked, snorted, or injected for a full dose.
The second question we asked the author was, what did he do to cope when he had to deal with Tommy? And he responded with, since both my wife and I went through this, we were able to switch roles at times to give each other a break from bearing the entire issue. Business travel sometimes provided me with a short-term escape from the problems he was going through. The periods when he was in jail or rehab also provided brief respites from the drama.
Our third question was, do you think there was any way for Tommy to get cleaner sooner? And Van Warner responded, we learned that he could only get clean once he decided he wanted it, that it was entirely out of our hands, and I'm not sure there's anything that could have been done differently. that would have brought him to stop using the drug early?
And the last question we asked him was, do you fear that Tommy could ever relapse again? And he responded with, of course, this is ultimately a brain chemistry problem once the person has become addicted. And since his brain is wired the way it is, he will always be at risk of drug dependency. That said, as long as he's able to continue working on his physical, mental, and spiritual well-being, he should continue to do fine. He's doing outstanding presently.
Okay, so English 9 honors would be one of the possible classes to put this book in. So the course description is it's designed for the advanced student who is mature, intellectually motivated, and demonstrates higher proficiency. In this class, students develop skillful analytic discussion and critical analysis in written and verbal expression. And they demonstrate learning through synthesis writing of various literary genres, the use of the latest technology, and interpret sophisticated reading materials.
On Pills and Needles connects to various English standards, the first being informational text and literary nonfiction, reading for all purposes, research and reasoning, and then writing and composition. And On Pills and Needles would create critical thinking in the English classroom and challenge students to understand advanced literary material.
Another class we're connecting On Pills and Needles to is psychology, because number one, students will better understand mental, physical, and social health, because opioid addiction affects all of those. And two, units in first aid, CPR, fitness, nutrition, cancer, substance abuse, relationships, and sexuality, because substance abuse is a part of the curriculum, and studying this book that is relative to that topic can enhance learning.
AP Psychology is another class that this book could fit in, and the content taught is biological basis of behavior, sensation and perception, states of consciousness, learning, cognition, motivation and emotion, developmental psychology, and personality. This book can fit in with most of these topics and can enhance students' learning.
So health is another class that could benefit from On Pills and Needles. This class provides students with learning about human behavior and mental processes. This book can relate to how drugs affect the brain and what goes through the user's mind when they are on the drug. It also students observe the brain, body, memory, personality, and abnormal behavior. This book can teach students how to notice signs of drug abuse and addiction. And adding this to the health classroom could spread awareness to the opioid problem and provide a useful resource for teaching.
So the relevance this book has to high schoolers is that a lot of them are participating in drugs currently, and it can help teach students to recognize signs of use and addiction in their peers. And it makes students aware of the dangers of the drugs being used around them. It explains the consequences of addiction. It shows how addiction can severely affect someone's personality. And this chart shows this past year's 12th graders' use of drugs, and the most common one was marijuana with 36.4%.
We took a survey about drug use in our school. 46 students responded, giving us a variety of answers. One of our questions was, have you ever used drugs or substances? 63% responded no, and 37% responded yes. When asked what drugs or substances used, 15% said they have used marijuana, and 39% said they used Juuls or vapes, and 4% have used
Our third question was, have you ever felt pressure to try a substance? And out of 46 responses, 65.2% of them said that they had not felt pressure, but 34.8% of the students said that they had felt pressure to try a substance. And our top responses said that they felt pressure to try a substance around their friends because they wanted to fit.
So some controversial topics seen in the novel are drug addiction, sporadic language, violence, suicide, a suicide attempt, mental health issues such as depression and anxiety, and family problems. And this is our works cited.
Do you have any questions?
So many questions.
So one of the things that last slide sort of brought to light is the amount of peer pressure that teenagers deal with for substance abuse. And so does the book address any of the preventative measures before getting to the level where Tommy was addicted? And in what ways would you incorporate in some of those abilities to combat that peer pressure as this is part of the curriculum?
So I think there's a lot of drug culture in teen life, so I think bringing awareness to that and shifting away from that through education and teaching that in classrooms can be effective in preventing drug usage.
Also in the book, it talked about whenever he was using drugs, he was usually with his friends. So it states that peer pressure is in fact like a problem. It doesn't say like how they affected him and how to prevent it, but it makes people aware of it.
Yeah, it doesn't really focus on the peer pressure in the book because he kind of got into it himself.
So I was really struck by that graph you had up. That was a map of the United States and the different colors of red, depending on presence of opioid addiction. What do you think is some of the drivers of the areas in the U.S. where there's a lot more concentration of people who struggle with opioid addiction versus where they don't?
So a lot of states with a lot of blue collar drugs, they experience more injuries, work-related injuries. So opioids are prescribed for them for pain relievers, and then eventually, because it's really addictive even for short-time use, they go back and try and get more and more. So in the blue-collar states, they're more prevalent.
And also in some states that have legalized marijuana, because marijuana can lead into those heavier drugs, so that might also be an explanation of why some of those states were darker, because they had other drugs that were already legalized.
So just a comment, I really like the, you reaching out to the author and getting those questions answered. That was really good research on your part. So that would be important for school boards to hear for sure. So in looking at the literature and what you're studying now, is there any books, is there any discussion at Arapahoe about opioids right now that you were able to find?
Not currently. A lot of people don't really realize how much of an impact it has, not only with adults, but teens our age and at Arapahoe. You can never know if people are struggling with drug addiction necessarily, but and bringing awareness to it.
Great job.
Thank you.
Great job. I think that's the last. Yeah, the rest of it. I'm gonna turn off YouTube so that you can post.
Bye.